In early 18th century London, a petty criminal became one of the most celebrated people in England. He wasn't celebrated despite the fact that he was a criminal. He was celebrated because he was a criminal. The authorities didn't share in the public sentiment, however. He was arrested several times, but each time he managed to escape custody. However, the law finally caught up with him, and as usual, the law won. Learn more about Honest Jack Sheppard and how he became a sensation in 18th century London on this episode of Everything Everywhere Daily. This episode is sponsored by Chubbies. Now that summer is here, your shorts shouldn't hold you back, and Chubbies gets that. Their line swim collection is built for comfort, with chafe-free liners, four-way stretch, and bold prints that are actually fun to wear. If you're someone who enjoys summers, and I know living in Wisconsin I do, Chubbies makes some of the most comfortable, flexible shorts out there. Their original stretch shorts come in a range of inseam lengths depending on how much leg you want to show. I went with the 7-inch, and the fabric is made for movement without sacrificing style. If you're heading to the pool or beach, their classic lined swim trunks are a favorite. They're lightweight, quick drying, and come in tons of fun designs: palm trees, flamingos, or even solid colors. Chubbies also has a solid lineup of performance polos, soft, breathable, and ready for anything from lounging at home to heading out for the day. For a limited time, Chubbies is giving my listeners 20% off your order with code DAILY at chubbyshorts.com. That's code DAILY at chubbyshorts.com. Show your support and tell them that I sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. This episode is sponsored by Planet Money. Tariffs, meme coins, Girl Scout cookies, what do they all have in common? Money. Economics is everywhere and everything fueling our lives, even when we least expect it. If you're a fan of Everything Everywhere Daily and are curious to learn something new and exciting about economics every week, I recommend you listen to the Planet Money podcast from NPR. What I like about Planet Money is that I can get updates on the week's financial news in about 30 minutes. Stories like the Federal Reserve changing interest rates or the impact of trade policy. From the job market to the stock market to prices at the supermarket, Planet Money is here to help explain it all. The Planet Money hosts go to great lengths to help explain the economy. They've done things like shot a satellite into space, started a record label, made a comic book, and shorted the entire stock market. All to help you better understand the world around you. Tune in to Planet Money every week for entertaining stories and insights about how money shapes our world. Stories that can't be found anywhere else. Listen now to Planet Money from NPR. London was a rapidly growing and bustling city in the early 18th century. It had become the largest city in Europe and was also a hub of commerce, politics, and culture. The streets were crowded and dirty, with open sewers and poor sanitation contributing to frequent outbreaks of disease. Social inequality was pronounced. The aristocracy and the rising middle class lived in nice townhouses, whereas the urban poor crowded into slums like those in St. Giles or Whitechapel. Crime was rampant, and public executions, such as those held at Tyburn, were popular spectacles. It was in this environment that Jack Sheppard was born. Jack Sheppard was born in Stepney, London in 1702. His family was poor, but were not criminals. After his father died when Jack was young, his mother struggled to raise him and his siblings. At the age of 6, he was placed in the workhouse, which was a common fate for impoverished children. By 14, he was apprenticed to a carpenter named Owen Wood. Jack was initially seen as bright, talented, and trustworthy, hence his nickname, Honest Jack. He proved to be a talented carpenter and served as an apprentice for 5 years. He might have gone on to have led an honest life, but his introduction to Elizabeth Lyon, a prostitute from Drury Lane, led him down a different path. Under her influence, Jack began frequenting taverns and eventually turned to petty theft and burglary to supplement his income. His path veered sharply when he began drinking in taverns in Covent Garden, where he met Joseph Blueskin Blake, a highwayman who would become both a companion and a corrupting influence. Blake, an experienced thief, introduced him to more sophisticated criminal techniques. Together, they committed a series of burglaries across London. Sheppard was exceptionally skilled at slipping through narrow spaces and removing locks, skills that came from his carpentry training and his 5'4" and very thin build. But these burglaries are not what made Jack famous. Sheppard's first major arrest came about through betrayal, not from his accomplice Blake. In May of 1724, Sheppard was arrested following information provided by a man named William Field, who was a local resident of Drury Lane and an acquaintance of Sheppard's. Field's motivation for betraying Sheppard appears to have been because of the growing rewards being offered and Field's resentment towards Sheppard. Based on this information, constables located Sheppard at a tavern in Drury Lane. They arrested him and Lyon and took them to St. Giles Roundhouse, a small prison used to hold criminals temporarily before their formal charging and trial. The St. Giles Roundhouse was a circular structure, hence the name Roundhouse, that served as a holding cell for the parish. It was not designed as a high-security facility, but rather as a temporary lockup for minor offenders and those awaiting transfer to more substantial prisons. Sheppard and Lyon were held in separate upper-floor cells, both of which were lightly guarded. Using his agility and carpentry skills, Sheppard slipped out of his restraints. According to accounts, he then broke through the ceiling into Lyon's room, freeing her as well. From there, he and Lyon made their way to the roof. Using a blanket rope made of knotted bedsheets, they lowered themselves down the side of the building and slipped away into the dark London streets, undetected until morning. When the constables discovered the empty cells at dawn, it caused a stir. The newspapers reported the escape with amazement and disapproval, but the public loved it. Sheppard became an immediate folk hero, young, clever, physically gifted, and rebellious. After this escape, Sheppard made no effort to flee London. Instead, he resumed his criminal activities with even greater boldness. Alongside his accomplice, Joseph Blueskin Blake, Sheppard continued robbing homes and shops, including a particularly brazen burglary of a pawnbroker in Drury Lane. By July 1724, Sheppard had become a known figure to London's criminal authorities. His second capture came about when he and Elizabeth Lyon were recognized while drinking at a tavern called the Cock and Magpie in Drury Lane. According to contemporary accounts, they were arrested by a group of constables led by a man named Quilt Arnold, who had been actively searching for Sheppard. This time, both Sheppard and Lyon were taken to the new prison in Clerkenwell, a more substantial facility than the St. Giles Roundhouse. Established in the 17th century, the new prison was considered more secure than many local holding facilities. At the new prison, authorities took greater precautions with Sheppard, aware of his previous escape. He was placed in a strong room on the upper floor of the prison and fitted with manacles. Undeterred by these measures, Sheppard immediately began planning his escape. He managed to conceal a nail on his person during his arrest, and this simple tool would prove crucial to his efforts. Over several days, he painstakingly worked at his manacles, gradually filing through the metal whenever the guards weren't watching. Once freed from his restraints, Sheppard turned his attention to the cell's window. The opening was protected by a substantial iron bar set firmly into the frame. Using the same nail that had freed him from his manacles, Sheppard managed to work the iron bar loose enough to remove it entirely from the window frame, and this created a very narrow opening. Because of his thin build, he was able to contort his body and squeeze through the opening. Rather than simply making his own escape and abandoning Elizabeth Lyon to her fate, he chose to help her escape as well. And this was no small challenge, as Lyon was considerably larger than Sheppard. Working from outside the cell, he methodically widened the opening by further loosening the window frame until it was just large enough for Lyon to squeeze through. He gathered the blankets and bedding from their cells and fashioned them together into a makeshift rope. Both he and Lyon used this rope to descend the exterior side of the wall, dropping down into the street below. They completed their escape in the middle of the night, and it wasn't until the morning check that their absence was discovered, by which time they had long since vanished. Following his dramatic escape from New Prison, Jack Sheppard's fame in London grew even more. Rather than fleeing the city or maintaining a low profile, Sheppard once again became increasingly bold, continuing his criminal activities and even frequenting some of the same taverns in Drury Lane. This boldness led to his third arrest in early August 1724, less than 2 weeks after his escape. This time, Sheppard was captured while drinking at a tavern in Mayfair. Authorities had been systematically searching taverns across London, knowing his desire for celebration after successful burglaries. When apprehended, he reportedly showed little concern, even making light remarks to his captors about his previous escapes. Given his growing reputation as an escape artist, officials took him to St. Anne's Roundhouse in Soho, another parish prison considered more secure than others. His captors made a point of announcing that they had taken special precautions to keep him confined, including placing him in a strong room in the upper floor. Despite these measures, Sheppard's third escape proved remarkably swift. Within just hours of his confinement, he had carefully examined his cell and identified structural weaknesses. Using techniques similar to his first escape, Sheppard focused on the ceiling of his cell, which was made of relatively thin wooden boards. Working quietly in the night, he managed to pry loose several boards in the ceiling, creating an opening large enough for his slight frame. Once through this opening, he found himself in a loft space above all the cells. From there, he made his way to a small window that gave access to the roof. The ease and speed of this third escape further enhanced Sheppard's growing legend. London newspapers reported extensively on the event, and public fascination with the young thief continued to grow. He had become not just a criminal, but a celebrity in London at this point, with broadsheets and ballads celebrating his exploits. This fame, however, would contribute significantly to his ultimate downfall. In September 1724, Sheppard was captured for a fourth time. Despite the substantial reward offered for his capture, the arrest came almost by accident. While drinking heavily at a tavern called the Shears in Clare Market, Sheppard was recognized by a shop owner who had previously been one of his victims. The man alerted a constable who happened to be nearby, and together they apprehended the intoxicated Sheppard without much difficulty. Given his now legendary escape abilities, the authorities took extraordinary measures with Sheppard's fourth imprisonment. He was taken directly to Newgate Prison, London's most secure facility. There he was placed in a special cell known as the Castle, which was specifically reinforced to hold particularly dangerous or escape-prone prisoners. He was heavily shackled with iron fetters that bound his legs and chains that secured him to the floor. Additionally, he was placed under constant surveillance with guards instructed never to leave him unattended. The seriousness of his situation intensified when Sheppard was quickly brought to trial at the Old Bailey. He faced multiple charges of theft and burglary with substantial evidence against him for numerous crimes. On September 12, 1724, he was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging, with the execution scheduled for early October. Despite the heightened security and his dire circumstances, Sheppard managed his most spectacular escape yet on October 15th. Using a small piece of metal that he had concealed, he freed himself from his shackles, broke through the ceiling of his cell, navigated through several locked rooms, and ultimately lowered himself from the prison using a blanket rope. This escape from what was supposed to be London's most impregnable prison while under a death sentence cemented his status as a folk hero. However, Sheppard's freedom would be brief. Despite now being the most wanted man in London, he still failed to leave the city or maintain a low profile. His celebrity status had seemingly made him overconfident. On October 31st, 1724, just 2 weeks after his dramatic Newgate escape, Sheppard was captured for the fifth and final time. He was discovered drunk at the Shears Tavern in Clare Market, remarkably, the same place where he had been captured before. This time, the authorities took unprecedented precautions. He was returned to Newgate, placed in an even more secure cell known as the Middle Stone Room, fitted with heavier irons than before, and chained directly to the floor. Armed guards were posted to watch him continuously, and visitors were strictly prohibited to prevent any outside assistance. On November 16, 1724, Jack Sheppard was taken to Tyburn for public execution. The procession to the gallows attracted one of the largest crowds ever seen in London, with estimates suggesting that 200,000 people lined the streets to catch a glimpse of the famous escape artist. Somewhere between a half to a third of the entire city showed up. Even on his final journey, there were rumors of planned rescue attempts, though none ever materialized. At Tyburn, Sheppard addressed the crowd briefly before his execution, showing the same bravado that had characterized his criminal career. He was hanged, bringing an end to his short but spectacular life at the age of just 22. To prevent any posthumous escape attempts by his supporters, his body was reportedly placed under guard until burial. Jack Sheppard's fame only grew after his death. He became a symbol of resistance to corrupt authority and an emblem of the clever underdog. His story was dramatized in John Gay's The Beggar's Opera in 1728 and in William Harrison Ainsworth's novel Jack Sheppard in 1839. His fame even led Parliament to pass laws censoring plays and novels that glorified criminals, fearing it would encourage public sympathy for crime. Jack Sheppard was brilliant due to his prison escapes, but he was also quite dim-witted because he kept returning to the same behavior that got him captured in the first place. While undoubtedly a criminal, Honest Jack became a folk hero whose cleverness, charm, and defiance of authority made him an enduring figure in British popular culture. The executive producer of Everything Everywhere Daily is Charles Daniel. The associate producers are Austin Oakton and Cameron Kiefer. I want to thank everyone who supports the show over on Patreon. Your support helps make this podcast possible. I'd also like to thank all the members of the Everything Everywhere community who are active on the Facebook group and the Discord server. If you'd like to join in the discussion, there are links to both in the show notes. And as always, if you leave a review or send me a boostagram, you too can have it read on the show.